Let's back up a little bit and then do a little bit of the previous episode's recap, and then we'll launch into Yelkov and what we can learn from him.
All right, it's going to be fun. I would love to do that. So let's just start with the term Merkava, or chariot, as you mentioned. When you had asked me to do this series, we never actually had discussed the framing, and then when I saw the calendar invite that you gave me with the term Merkava, I got really excited. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what the Merkava is, and then how it applies here.
Great.
The term Merkava is actually first or most popularly known in a place in the book of Ezekiel, of Yechezkel, called the Merkava, the story of the Merkava, of the chariot, and it's one of the two most Kabbalistic pieces of the written, oral, revealed Torah, and its deeper meanings are so profound that's where you see a lot of the Mefarshim talking about this is not what you study, or you can't do that one on your own, and you need like a very, very, very specific type of teacher and situation to learn it. And the other one is actually the creation of the world, is also discussed. Maisa Bereshis, that you'll never really understand what's happening there. Right. It's one of those things that I think everyone relates to an extent. Whether it's like on Simchas Torah or the first parsha of the year after Rosh Hashanah and Sukkot, and we open up the Chumash, and you're like, whoa, and you're like, I could spend a whole year on these pages, So the Maisa Merkava is an incredible piece in Yechezkel, and it has a lot of different references to like mystical visions and like beings, what was it like? There's a term called chashmal that's in there, electricity, and which is like in modern Hebrew, it's term like there's all these things, and it's like we don't really know what they are, but it's incredibly deep.
But the aspect of that required one teacher, one student, was for actually following the roadmap, right, that he set out. So this is
right.
safe. This is
100%. Oh yeah, 100%. I'm just getting started with the background because when you hear the term Merkava, I wanted to make sure that like if someone's listening for the first time and hasn't heard it or has heard the term but didn't know like where you hear that term, that's its popularity, and it's when you tell a person don't think about like elephants, it's the only thing you're thinking about is right. The elephants, right? And so like it's like this play, and obviously you can open up the book of Ezekiel and read it. The best version I've ever seen, and I haven't spent a lot of time on it ever like really discussing it, is actually Aryeh Kaplan himself. He plays with it in a way that he reveals some of it to you and like some of its meaning. It's beautiful in his meditation books.
Is it in that book?
I don't believe it's in the regular Jewish meditation one. I think it might be in his first one, the meditation on the Bible.
Gotcha.
But I highly recommend reading it. Anyways, that's just the term Merkava. What does this have to do with the Avos? So one of the notions of Merkava, a chariot, is as follows. A chariot is an incredibly important tool. If you want to go somewhere, we have Merkavas. They're called cars. And a Merkava does a lot. It helps you in a journey. If you want to get somewhere, if you want to reach a destination, so your Merkava in some ways is everything. If it doesn't have the right wheels, you can't get there. If it doesn't have the right protection, let's say, you won't be able to get somewhere, right? It's almost like there's a requirement that the Merkava is decked out exactly to fit the being that's going to ride it. And you think about it in metaphor when you're talking about cars today. So I have a very eclectic family. My brother-in-law is obsessed with cars. He loves them. Like he has this really cool Mustang and
okay.
And
muscle cars,
old cars, new cars. He has an ATV. Like that's his joy. And I love it. And it's so much fun to see what he does when he has when he has like that itch and he gets in a car. And then I have a sister who is super hippie. Shoes aren't really their thing, and they actually used to live in Israel, about a mile out of Gaza. It's its own like miracle story. Their entire community was 6 months away from October 7th. Their whole community had to disband for like government reasons. They were like going to be relocated. They were right next to Be'eri. Be'eri was one of those, yeah. So they've been doing some exploring, and they recently bought an RV, and the RV is like their Merkava. We were having like fun trying to name it. Her husband wanted to call it Columbus, and like it's all about like they're exploring the world, and finding their way through this chariot. So the idea of a chariot, you think about like every person, like certain people, don't care if there's dings in their car, it expresses a lot about a person. It's funny. It also expresses a lot about like the current, situation with percentages for loans like in the States. But specifically, the reason I'm describing this is that the Avos were known as the Merkava, as chariots. So what were they the Merkava, the chariot, for? God. What does that mean? So the journey of history of the world is led through, is tied to the Jewish people. And Hashem's revelation in this world throughout all of time is tied to the Avos, and then thus their children. So the Merkava is someone who is, number one is the idea that the expression of the rider is going to be through them. And we spoke about that a lot with Avram and Yitzchak already. The idea of understanding godliness through Yaakov, through Avram was the notion of chesed, and God being king over the world. Yitzchak was the expression of Tchias HaMesim, of revival of the dead, and of the power of Gvura. So that's one element of Merkava, of the idea of a chariot, that God is going to express Himself through them. But there's another layer of the term that's more a complement to the Avos in a different way. A Merkava chariot is led by a horse and its rider, and you have to be willing to allow the person who's leading you to show you where you're going. Right. And in life, that means you have to give up on what you want in order for that thing to be, to be leading instead.
Right. You're just going for the ride.
Exactly. And the Avos were that. Their entire life, their entire being, their entire essence was God, was Hashem's expression in this world. In different ways, by the way. Their personality and their gifts were beautiful and unique, and so there was, the Lincoln Town Car, Avram, and there's the, for Yitzchak, it was probably, if you're talking about Gvura, maybe, one of the, a tank or something like that. But the idea is that they were mevatel themselves. They completely nullified themselves to God and allowed, God to flow through them, so to speak.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's break this down a little more before we actually get into the topic of Yokov and the attributes of Ferris.
Sure.
And this is good because earlier this week I had Rabbi Yacobian on.
Speaking of Yacobian.
Yeah. And I asked him to go back and discuss what actually happened in Gan Eden. What was the original issue there? The original sin.
Right.
And he really broke down beautifully the nature of the same thing we're all struggling with to this very day. The idea of making the I the one that says, I choose to not follow my will, but Hashem's will. So
hard.
Right, which is very hard.
Yeah.
So that was the whole nature of the conversation we had. It was very enlightening, but so that is sort of what you were saying, is that the Avos, the forefathers, especially in these specific areas, made Hashem's will their will entirely.
Right.
We probably need to step up a few steps back, go back a little further. because obviously Hashem is not kindness, or he's not Gevurah, he's everything, he's one. But from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, when he created the world, he created the Torah, and he created the world, he created the manner in which he will interact with his creation, and then used that same system for the way in which he will interact with creation as the prototype for how man should behave with the rest of creation and reciprocating back towards Hashem. Like you have the idea that Hashem, he made space, and then we now have to, like an example, like we were talking about with Rabbi Jacobi, and say, like, now we have to make space. Say, okay, I'll do whatever Hashem wants. So with these building blocks, these emotive traits, they all work in unison together, but each of the forefathers brought in, or sort of embodied and perfected one of them. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And with that, so if I'm understanding where you want to go with it, you're asking...
I'm trying to provide the building blocks of what all this really means.
Like how is it that God expresses himself through a being?
Yes, and then how we then become a chariot to carry that attribute and how it fits into the entire spectrum.
So I'll give a little bit more on that. Wow, this could really be its own podcast. I love this topic. But just to elaborate a little bit more. So I mean, it's beautiful because you're really getting into like the kishkas of all of Judaism here. There's the concept of Kiddush Hashem, of sanctifying God's name, is really a beautiful thing. And it's often it's a term that's thrown out there in a lot of different ways and not always understood properly. And the notion of Kiddush Hashem is really the idea of God expressing himself through people. Let me explain what I mean by that. One time I had a terrible experience. I opened the laundry machine, and I found at the bottom of the machine a bencher, and it broke me. I felt horrible. I saw this bencher torn into like a million pieces, and I didn't know what to do. I had to call Shilas because it's like, how do I even collect all of them? And
was it all like torn apart?
Yeah, I felt terrible, and so what I basically concluded to do with the Rav was to keep running it through the dryer, and the filter would catch the pieces, and I would collect them for Geniza. And what occurred to me, these precious little pieces of paper, even like the parts that didn't even have God's name on it, it was part of this like thing that was an expression of thanks to God for the blessings of food. The Jewish people are known Ki Shema Hashem Nikra Alecha, that Hashem's name is called upon you. We carry God's name. Right? We're Hashem's people. Mika Amcha Yisrael, who's like God's nation, Goy Echad Ba'aretz, the one nation, in the land. Right? We have a specific job, a task that God gave us, holding the Torah, representing His name, being a light to the world, and so each one of these tiny little pieces of paper was precious, and I pick it up, and as much as I could, I would kiss them, and put them away. And you think about like the Jewish people and the laundry machine that we've been run through so many years, and how much pain and how much hurt, and these tiny little shards of that you would think are like worthless, and it's like they're lifted and they're kissed, and they're part of like the tribe of the world of Hashem. We each carry a piece of Torah, like our neshama, all this. So the notion of a Kiddush Hashem is when you do something and you represent, just by definition, representing God. So your actions, no matter what they are an expression of like, well, this is God's people, right? Or this is God's will being expressed in reality. So if you I guess a strong example of this would be someone like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He became such an incredibly well-known person. The United States set an Education Day. On his birthday, it became like a legal holiday. Not a holiday like to take off, but you can look it up after if you like. There's like a formal day. I don't know what the English date was, but it was set as an Education Day. And he even invented a scope for a tank. So that a tank could still look forward even if it was going up and down in the sand. It was like a rotating scope, and there was people would flock to him from all over the world to ask for advice, Jewish, non-Jewish, even now, when post-mortem, people go to visit his kever and want to connect to God through him, to find closeness and find blessing. And there are people out there that you look and you're like, that's a real Kiddush Hashem. Avram Avinu we spoke about as the one who, the first blessing of Shema Esrei, represents God as King of the world, and everything through Abraham became that. So there's a notion of Merkava that's there, right? That's the idea of Kiddush Hashem, is that you're a vehicle for Hashem's expression in the world. There's more layers of it, and we'll actually talk about it probably with Yaakov here, when it comes to Yaakov representing not just himself but the entire nation of the Jewish people, right? We're known as Bnei Yisrael, as the children of Yisrael, and throughout time we're still tied to Yaakov's name. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the idea is that through them, Hashem is guiding the history of the world. Vilna Gaon actually, the Vilna Gaon actually says by a bris, we have a term. We say v'charos imo habris. We say God cut a covenant, cut a deal, right? It's one of the few times in where the English language has a really good expression to express something in Torah. It's a funny phrase, to cut a deal, because a deal usually bonds people, but v'charos imo habris means that to cut, to sever.
Right.
So what's the krisa? What's the severance in a bris, in a bond? So what he says is that a real bond, the Vilna Gaon says something it's a beautiful message. It really is a life message. To really bond with someone, a real deal, a real bris, a covenant, only happens when you're willing to give something up. When you take a piece of yourself and give it to the other. So what happens with the bris of us? So we give the piece of us that we give to Hashem, the orla skin, it represents the future, right? It represents our progeny, our children. We cut off the foreskin from the place of creation, and what we say that we're now elevating the part of the body that creates. Our future is now tied to God. And it's something that doesn't grow back, and no matter where you go, it'll always, you're always part of that covenant. What does God cut off? God gives us His future. His name is tied to us. And when we do bad things and represent Hashem, there's one thing, you do a sin in private, but when you make a chilul Hashem, when you disgrace God's name by doing something publicly that's terrible, and the whole world is going to see it, so you're now tied. Hashem tied His name to you. He tied His future and His progeny and His family to you. You do to Him. That's the Vilna Gaon insight here. So that's the Merkava. That's the idea of this incredible bond, like that car, the Batmobile, a Havdil. It's like that's Batman's car. If it goes and and does destruction because the Joker stole it, it's still gonna you're gonna think Batman did it, right?
Right. That's